Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Slate demo series. My name is Courtney Muma, and I am the Assistant Director of Student Success Implementations, and I'm so excited to talk to you all about retention data in Slate, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my colleague, Allison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Beebe. I am the Slate Student Success Implementation Strategist at Carnegie. Today, we're going to chat about Slate for Student Success and how it can be used to collect and take action on student success data. I want to kick things off with a brief overview of Slate for Student Success. Many of you are likely already familiar with Slate for Admissions, which will give you a great foundational jumping off point, but there are a few key differences when it comes to using Slate for Student Success. First is the population of students we serve. Slate for Student Success allows us to work with students from the point in which they're first enrolled all the way up until they graduate and move on from the institution. We can keep track of the courses they take, extracurricular activities they're involved in, meetings they take or miss with the academic advising staff, essentially all of the things that your current students are up to while they're enrolled at your institution. Another key difference is that we already know who our students are. Unlike in admissions, we don't typically create any new records in Slate in the student success world. We're instead importing student data from your SIS and other external systems and compiling a well-rounded and holistic picture of the student in Slate from that pre-existing data. One thing our admissions folks can take comfort in as we dive into today's topic is that Slate for Student Success utilizes all of the same tools and modules that you're used to on the admissions side, just with a bit of a different spin. Today, we're going to mainly focus on how we can utilize forms and queries to aid in student retention. We want to give current students the ability to tell us how they're feeling, especially in the areas of sense of belonging, confidence in their education, and any barriers they may be facing. Some of you may have guessed it, we are going to use a form to capture that data. Here's an example of a form that you can use with current students to get a pulse on how they're feeling at your institution. You can have your students complete this form annually, once per term, or maybe as part of your course registration process, just to ensure that you're getting form responses. An important thing to note here is that each of these form fields are actually mapped to an entity. The reason for that is so that we can track each student's historical form submissions and monitor those changes over time. We use entities a ton in student success. They're Slate's way of allowing one-to-many relationship data to be collected. So one student can have multiple rows of information, multiple survey responses, multiple courses they're enrolled in, and so on. You'll also see on the screen here that we have a translation code. This is really going to come into play in a few slides, but as a quick overview, what this is doing is taking each possible response from the rating scale on our survey form and setting it as a numeric value. With this example, we're going to use these values to calculate total belonging, confidence, and barrier scores. We can then use those total scores to create curated outreach plans and resources for each individual student. I'm going to turn things over to Courtney so she can dive a little deeper into what that looks like in Slate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Allison. Let's first take a look at this example student, Dylan. So this is what that entity and form submission will look like on the actual student record. This looks like one form submission. And so it's broken down by those three different categories: confidence, belonging, and barriers. And I want to focus specifically on the barriers section of this. Dylan has a pretty high total barrier score of 170. If you were to say that he strongly agrees with everything, the total barrier score would be 200, or a perfect total barrier score, which is really, really high. So 170 is quite a high score. If we look at the other areas for Dylan, confidence and belonging, he has a mid-range total confidence score and a pretty low belonging score. So based on this form response, we have a pretty good picture of how Dylan is feeling in relation to his ability to complete his degree and the barriers that he's facing. If we take a look at example student number 2, this is Monty. We're painting a pretty different picture here. Monty has a lower barrier score where they are neutral or somewhat disagree with most of our barrier questions. So neutral about cost concerns, mental health isolation, mental or physical health barriers, and outside factors, somewhat or neutral for all of those, which gives them a total barrier score of 90. And on the flip side, they have a pretty high belonging score and a mid-range confidence score. So between these two students, we have very different pictures that are being placed. The other thing that I want to mention here is that each of these students have filled out this form once. The purpose of having this information on an entity is that we want to see these form responses from the time that they are a freshman until the time that they are a senior to see how these form responses change over time. So for Monty, maybe their barrier score will go lower, maybe it'll go higher as different things change. If they have different roommates, if they have different courses that they're taking, we would expect these total scores to change. And we just want to keep a pulse and a temp check on these throughout their institutional journey. That is why it's important to have a plan in place for administering these surveys so that you can have this historical data and using that entity for it. Like Allison was mentioning, student success is a repository for a bunch of different information that can be collected from outside systems. We don't necessarily want to create more information within Slate outside of these student forms and these surveys that are submitted. And so examples of data that can be imported and reported on is extracurricular activities, on-campus jobs, cumulative GPA, class attendance holds, flags, and their attendance in meeting with advisors. This is a good example of retention-related data that can be held and reported on within Slate that paints a picture about how the student is doing in relation to their institutional journey. Extracurricular activities and on-campus jobs specifically show that if they are involved in either one of those, they have a student saying hi at least once a week or every other week on their on-campus jobs, or as a part of an intramural or a club, those types of things. And so if a student is involved in those, that's painting a different kind of picture than if they're not involved in those. In the next slide, we're going to show a query library and how to pair these different pieces together and use them effectively in different tools of Slate. Here's an example of a query library. If y'all haven't used a query library yet, oh my gosh, I highly recommend using them. They are templated versions of filters and exports that can be used anywhere that filters and exports can be used. So think rules, think different reports, think evergreen types of queries. Anywhere that those filters and exports can be used, you can use your query library so long as you are on the same base. Let's dive into some of these examples. So we talked about appointments earlier. This is an example of what that query library filter can look like. If you have your appointments in Slate using the scheduler tool, this is what that configuration would look like. So we're joining out to our individual advising appointment and we're filtering on a form submission date if it's greater than today minus 90. So if it's been submitted within the last 90 days. We can also filter on the registration status. So attended, no-show, registered, any wealth of any information related to that form response, we can query on here. For this example, we're looking for not exist a form submission in the last 90 days. So they haven't engaged in the academic advising appointments in 90 days. This one is one of my favorite comparisons. My favorite types of filters out there is a comparison. And so we wanted to identify students who had a cumulative GPA between 2.5 and 3.49. So these are the students who are doing fine academically. They're right in the middle of the road. They could be doing better, but they're also not doing terrible. And so in order to do this, we are exporting that person cumulative GPA, which is being imported from your SIS. And then we're setting it against two static values of 2.5 and 3.49. If your dean's list or your academic probation thresholds are different than this, you would simply just change those literals to whatever that threshold might be. On the left-hand side, you can also see that we can have greater than and less than. These are just to give you options for your filter criteria. And then we can go a little deeper than that as well. So in this example database, we have our class schedule as an entity, go figure. So we can see all of the different courses that the student is enrolled in. And so the first part in green, we have the class schedule is enrolled. They are currently enrolled in this class. And then we also have a notes entity. And so having an opportunity for faculty, staff, advisors to submit notes on students. We have our class schedule paired, so they're currently enrolled in this course, paired with a filter of a note reason of faculty concern. So what this combinations of filters is doing is that somebody, a faculty, somebody has submitted a note saying that they are concerned about the student in relation to the course that they are taking. This is a powerful combination of filters to high level identify students that somebody has said, I'm concerned about you. How we can use these in the different areas and tools of Slate is as follows. We can make population rules. So in this example, we have that filter that we were showing earlier of cumulative GPA is between 2.5 and 3.49. We also have the filter of exist previously involved in extracurriculars. And so they used to be involved, but they are no longer involved in extracurriculars. And they have a low belonging score, meaning that they are feeling disconnected from the campus community as a whole. This paints a pretty clear picture of the student. They're doing just fine in classes. They used to be involved, but they're no longer involved, and they're not feeling super connected with the campus community as a whole. So we have a population, a resource population for clubs and organizations. We want them to start receiving emails and communications about upcoming events, upcoming clubs and organizations, upcoming guest speakers, different types of ways to engage in the community as a whole to help boost that belonging score and hopefully get them to be involved in an additional extracurricular. Another example is this combination of filters here. So this one, they do have an extracurricular. They are involved in campus in some kind of way, whether it's an on-campus job or they are involved in an intramural sport. They have attended an advising session in the last 90 days, so they have met with their academic advisor. They have not attended a tutoring appointment in the last 90 days. So if you have your tutoring appointments also set up in Slate, you can query on that information. They have a low cumulative GPA, so it's under 2.5, but they have a high confidence score. So they feel confident in their ability to complete their degree. This paints a pretty clear picture of the student feels really good overall. They are involved in courses, they are doing the right steps and meeting with their academic advisors. They are just struggling in their course load. They don't have a high GPA. They haven't attended their tutoring sessions. And so they just need some help with their courses. So we have a population for tutoring services in which that population is tied to another drip marketing campaign where we are advertising different tutoring appointments, either one-on-one, group tutoring sessions, different events in which we can help the student get connected to help raise that GPA. So these are two different examples of how you can use populations and rules with those query library filters in order to take actions on those students. Another way, and this is a little bit more manual, is to have a to-do list on the main homepage. So here we have different links to queries for academic advisors to check on. And so the first one is students who need to sign up for an academic advising appointment. This one's pretty straightforward. We're using that same filter that we were seeing in a couple of the other ones of they have not signed up for an academic advising appointment in the last 90 days. In each of these filters or each of these queries, we are using the filter of staff assigned is current user or the academic advisor is the current user. So each of these links is dynamic to the user who is signed into Slate. So it is customizable for each person who is signed in. Vice versa, we have the students who have recently dropped a course. This is a really helpful query for advisors to see, oh my gosh, a student has dropped all of their courses and I did not know about this. This query, if you have your courses in Slate and that course schedule, can pull in that information and then immediate action can be taken place for that student of your academic advisor reaching out saying, hey, didn't know that you were planning on dropping out all of your courses. Are you okay? And then the rest are kind of touch bases. Students with financial aid hold, students with registration hold sounds going to be especially important around registration time. We want to make sure that those are resolved so students can register for the upcoming courses, and students who have a low score of belonging. Those are just general students who you should check in with, making sure that they're doing okay, not at risk for retention issues, and so on and so forth. And that was an overview, high-level overview of the different ways that you can collect and take action on student success data within a Slate instance. My biggest piece of advice is to start small and to start by asking your students. There's a lot of different retention models out there. There's a lot of predictive analytics that we can take by using biographical data, financial aid data, so on and so forth. But the biggest missing piece to that is just asking your students. They will tell you so long as you ask them. So start asking your students how they are feeling in these different areas of confidence, belonging, and barriers, and using that with the other wealth of information that Slate allows you to collect and creating these resource-based outreach plans. You also don't have to do it all at once. Start with the data that you have and then build on from there. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to reach out to me or Allison if you have any additional questions. Thanks, everybody.